You're listening to episode 85 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with registered nurse Morganne Skinner about how to navigate invisible illnesses and how to communicate not only with family and friends, but also with your doctors. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and today's conversation is a little different than usual because we're not so much talking about strategies and tips and methodologies, but we're really just talking about personal experiences and how to really own your own experience, to not let other people define your experience for you, and to be able to navigate the world when dealing with a chronic illness that other people can't see the symptoms of. So today's guest is Morganne Skinner. She's a registered nurse currently working in public health and has been a nurse for 6 years now. Outside of work, Morganne is usually found running or hiking trails. She qualified for the Boston Marathon and then left the country to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia. She lived there for 2 years in a rural village with the Lunda tribe, working in all things development, public health, and agriculture. Morganne's interests include all things women's health and nutrition, inspired by her public health experience in Zambia, and now along with her own health challenges with endometriosis. She runs the Instagram handle Running on Endo, and she has a blog as well, which both of these we'll link to in the show notes. Our conversation today is really centered around getting diagnosed when you have an invisible illness and how to navigate not only the medical system, but also just daily life with friends and family. I'm sure a lot of you that are listening have dealt with symptoms that nobody else could see or didn't appreciate. And so I think you'll enjoy this conversation that we have and really feel a little bit more seen and heard because you can hear yourself in Morganne's experience. Now, Morganne wants to note that her experience is just her own. She's not speaking in absolute truths here, only speaking for herself. And it's easy to disregard other people's experiences when it's similar to us or not as severe in our eyes. And so she invites you all, as you listen to her story, to rather than compare yourself to her illness, her experience, to just acknowledge that it's difficult for everyone in their own way and that the physical aspect of illnesses does not always correlate to the severity of the illness. And so just giving you the permission to let Morganne's story be her story, that you can connect with it, you could be inspired by it, but to not make any sort of judgment about your own experience based on what Morganne has to share today. So I'm super pumped to have her on the show. And without further ado, here is Morganne Skinner. Hey y'all, so before we get into this interview, I just wanted to let you know that we did have a little bit of some audio issues with Morganne's side of the audio equation. So they're just minor, but I just wanted to warn you, unfortunately, sometimes tech doesn't always work exactly the way we want it to, but that's okay. I still think you will enjoy the conversation, and she's got a lot of wisdom to share. So I hope you enjoy. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Morganne Skinner. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Morganne.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So I would love if we could just start with your story, because I know that the main topics you wanted to talk about today was really the concept of invisible illnesses and the difficulty of getting a diagnosis when people can't see on the outside what you're experiencing. So if you don't mind just sharing whatever you're comfortable with about your story and about how you became so passionate about helping people that are experiencing invisible illnesses.
Yeah, I have had quite a few experiences with different invisible illnesses. When I was in high school, I was in an accident and had a traumatic brain injury. And, that was kind of like my first exposure and experience with an invisible illness. And then as I got a little bit older, kind of working through that time, I also had an eating disorder. And again, that's one of those things where you're experiencing symptoms and challenges, but on the outside, people can't really see what you're going through. Fast forward a few years later, I started having a lot of health issues and discovered that I had endometriosis. And if anybody listening to this has had endometriosis, they know that it's an invisible illness for sure, because it's a lot of the symptoms are not seen by anybody else. And that can be really discouraging as well. So I've had quite a few invisible illnesses in my lifetime.
And is that something that you felt like other people weren't really recognizing, even doctors, or, was it just certain people that you felt like weren't acknowledging or appreciating the experience you were having?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because for all of them, they kind of have they might have a few physical presentations here and there, but the majority of the symptoms that I was feeling and the long-term effects are not visible to the eye. So with the traumatic brain injury, I had surgery, and so that part was visible, but the healing that takes term and the symptoms like headaches and memory loss or short-term memory loss or trouble with words and things, those are things that I experienced for years after. But once I was healed, people didn't really see that anything was wrong. Doctors, family, friends, that included. Same thing with eating disorders. That's something that a lot of times people think, or they expect an eating disorder to look a certain way or to present itself in a certain way. And that's not the truth. And that certainly wasn't the case for me. So it's harder to get people to see it as an illness, as something that's really going on. And the same thing with endometriosis. Doctors, especially with that one, they really want to see something going on. They want to see labs that are off. They want to see something more objective. And with these types of illnesses, there's not a whole lot of objective data out there. And so that made it really difficult getting a diagnosis for endometriosis, but, difficult for family members and friends as well to know that there's something going on without me physically saying, hey, there's something going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the challenges with Western medicine is it is so much based on being able to observe an actual issue, whether that be a lab value, whether that be a physical presentation. And if you're not having any sort of observable symptoms, the, Western methodology of medicine doesn't really have a lot of options for you. I mean, maybe they'll say, take a painkiller or go on birth control, some of the things that are a little bit more just Band-Aid kind of fixes. But it is unfortunate that I think the way that most physicians and most healthcare providers are trained in the United States is so focused on I need to see clear evidence that this is happening, or either it's not happening, or we had a couple of conversations recently with people talking about gut health issues and how they were told by their doctors that literally it's in their heads, and not helpful, first of all. Second of all, I feel like that's kind of the definition of medical gaslighting, but it is something that happens so much in hormone health as well, and especially endometriosis. So how have your experiences with the traumatic brain injury, the eating disorder, the endometriosis, the different issues you have run into over I don't actually know how old you are, so I'm going to guess the last 10 to 15 years. How has that actually affected other areas of your life?
There's a lot to say here. Physically, for all of those, day to day, I just don't feel well. There's with the traumatic brain injury, there was just an insane amount of fatigue, just wanting to sleep all the time and not feeling myself. My mood was different. So that really affected my day to day. And, with the eating disorder, you have to eat, you're dealing with that every time you're supposed to be eating, with social engagements. And even through recovery, that's like a lot of mental energy that you have to combat when you're working through that type of stuff. And then with endometriosis, it's like you never know what symptoms you're going to have. And that's really hard too. And that kind of goes into like the social aspect too, because it's really hard to plan social events or attend things because you might feel okay today, but then tomorrow or even later that day, you might not. And the symptoms can just vary so much. A lot of people think of endometriosis as like a woman's problem or like menstrual cramps, but it's a whole body disease and it affects a lot. And so, so it has affected a lot. And really like all of those have really affected me, like with my mental health for sure, because there's just a lot of anxiety around that. Like, how will people perceive me? Will people think that I'm being flaky or that I don't want to be around them? Or do they think I'm too sensitive? Do I think I'm making it up? Because it's like, well, I don't want to have to bring this up all the time, but it's something that affects me 24/7. And I need to let you know that I'm not trying to miss out on these things, but I don't feel well and I have to do what's best for me right now. So I'm sorry. So it's affected a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I feel like, and I know you're a nurse, so I feel like you probably appreciate that generally health information, personal health information isn't something that people necessarily want to just be sharing with everybody, right? Like, especially if it's something like the brain injury or the eating disorder stuff that maybe feels like it affects your mental health a lot more. I know endometriosis does as well, but in some ways it's almost like people will accept physical pain as being a more legitimate excuse than like mental issues or emotional challenges, that kind of thing. But it is something, regardless of what the illness is, that it kind of stinks that you don't really necessarily want to tell people all your medical information. But if you're not telling them, it's like at some point they might be like, why are you not able to come out and do things? Or why did you cancel plans 3 times in a row or something like that? Because it is something where, if somebody doesn't know that you're dealing with an illness and you're not comfortable to share that and all of that, that it is easy to make assumptions about why somebody might be not, showing up when you're expecting them to.
Yeah, and that's something that through all these things, like I definitely had support of a therapist, and like one of the big things with the anxiety was like that thing. And I had to learn to set boundaries and remember that it's my choice to tell people like my condition and how much to disclose to them, because it is a lot of energy and it's exhausting. And some people like they don't really care, to be honest. Like they want you to be well, but they don't want all the details. And, it's hard when you share a lot and you're vulnerable and then people don't support you. And so like one thing I've had to learn for sure is like setting those boundaries and choosing who I'm sharing information with and who I'm not.
Mm-hmm. So what was your experience getting the endometriosis diagnosis? Because I feel like with like a TBI, it's very kind of clear, like there's an event, right? It's not like you're like, how did this happen? You can probably pretty easily pinpoint things. And even with the eating disorder, I feel like there's a little bit more observable behaviors that can be, documented. So what was the experience that you had with the endometriosis diagnosis?
Yeah. So like first thing, it was very, very hard. Essentially, I self-diagnosed myself, which is actually pretty common for a lot of women experiencing endometriosis. They'll have these symptoms and they may not know at first what's going on, and then they figure it out, and then they have to find a doctor who can verify that. And that's kind of my experience. I started having symptoms when I was living abroad in Zambia. And at that time, I also had a lot of gut health issues. And one of my biggest symptoms were digestive symptoms. And so, it was just kind of like, oh, no, it's not that. It's you just need to change your diet, or you just need to do X, Y, or Z. And I was like, okay, well, I really feel like there's something else going on, especially like, I do have that history of background of a nurse. And so like, I know how certain symptoms usually present. And I was like, well, either I have a low pain tolerance and then very sensitive, or there's something else going on because this doesn't seem right. And so I kept persisting. And when like I would go to a doctor and they would run my labs and be like, nope, everything's fine. You're fine. I would just say, well, I don't feel fine, so I'm going to find somebody else. And so it was kind of like that. I bounced around between primary care and a GI doctor. I went to a few gynecologists, and a few of them did say, yeah, it's probably endometriosis. You can get pregnant, take birth control, or deal with it, is pretty much what I was given. And it took me about 2 years to find somebody that was a specialist and who knew their stuff and was like, yep, it's endometriosis. You need to have surgery, yada, yada, yada. And that's how I got my diagnosis. And for most women, it's actually 7 to 9 years from the time that they experience symptoms to the time that they get diagnosed. So I'm very fortunate that for me, it was much quicker. Even though I have always dealt with like painful periods and things, I just, that was something that I just kind of like dealt with. It wasn't until I had all these other symptoms that I was like, okay, I need to look into this much further. So yeah, that's pretty much how it happened.
Well, and I'm guessing a big part of that shortening of the time span was your persistence, because I feel like most people, for obvious reasons, if their doctor says that everything's fine, they're not going to argue with it, right? They're like, all right, I guess, maybe I'm just sensitive, right? Like the way that you were reacting before. But it sounds like because you were not going to take fine for an answer, you're like, no, this is not fine. Somebody's going to figure out what's going on for me. I'm guessing that that's one of the reasons, maybe not the only reason, but certainly one of the reasons that it took you less time to get the answers. Because if you had waited, or you were like, all right, I guess that's it, and you wait another year before you go back to somebody, it just kind of expands that timeline of actually finding out what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And I also, during that time, I started charting my menstrual cycle. For me, that was like the missing piece in the whole part, because it gave me that objective data to like what I was feeling. And that's really what doctors thrive off of. They really like to see that, because it's useful, right? It's useful to see because you can compare it to other people. And so, especially when you're talking about the menstrual cycle, it's so hard to say like what's one pain versus another pain when you're in two separate bodies. So when I was charting my menstrual cycle, I was able to see things that were happening that were clearly not normal. And I could also see that my digestive symptoms were occurring like at certain events, like during my ovulation time and during my actual period. And so that was kind of like where I was able to like really trust myself and know like, hey, there really is something going on. And just because they don't know it doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It just means that they don't know it, right? So I need to find somebody else who does know their stuff and who will listen to me. And I think that that's really the key. And it's something that, I learned as a nurse is listen to the patients and they will tell you what's wrong, right? And that was like really what I needed to believe, that as the patient side of things going through this process was like, that I need to find somebody who's going to really listen to me and not tell me that, well, you're not presenting the way that this disease presents, so you don't have it. I needed somebody who would dig a little bit further and look beyond the normal labs and look beyond like all the other things and really listen to like dig further and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting that you say that nurses are taught to listen to the patient. Do you feel like being, having gone through medical training and everything, do you feel like that's something that's missing in the doctor medical training?
So I obviously haven't gone through that side of the training, but I have worked with a lot of doctors, of course. And, it's the nursing and the doctor world are very separate. Like nursing is very patient focused. We're very holistic in our care, whereas doctors are very much focused on the disease itself. So they're driven on diagnosing and relieving symptoms and that side of things, whereas nurses were really driven towards making the person feel better overall. And it encompasses more than just the physical presentation. So I think that, and nurses are advocates. So we have to listen to our patients so we can present that to the doctor. And nurses are, especially bedside nurses, you're with the patients during the whole shift, which is usually 12 hours, whereas the doctors, they're stretched. They don't have that much time. And so they only have a few minutes to be with the patient, and they rely on nurses for sure to help guide the treatment plan.
Mm-hmm. I think in a perfect world, it seems to make sense to have it set up that way, to have like some people that are more in depth with the patient, and then other people that are kind of more just getting stopping the bleeding, as they might say. Do you feel like in that system, is it being used the way that it is really designed to, or do you feel like there is, this disconnect between what nurses are telling? And obviously we're generalizing here, right? Like we're not saying all nurses, all doctors, but do you feel like, have you ever had the experience where as a nurse, you felt that the doctor wasn't really taking your feedback about a patient seriously?
Oh, for sure. For sure. That happens a lot. Not all the time, but it does happen. And, there's a lot of reasons behind that. Like there's there's the difference in the education. Maybe the doctors don't know you well, so they don't really trust you. Maybe they're seeing something or they've been told something else. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different reasons for that, for sure. One thing that like I really liked at a place I worked before, we would do rounding, and everybody, all the different members of the healthcare team would get together and you talk about that patient. I think like that is like the ideal scenario where you get everybody's input, the nurse, the dietitian, the pharmacist, the physical therapist, like everybody with the doctor, and you can like make decisions together and you get everybody's input. And I think that's great. But unfortunately, like when the healthcare system is set up the way it is here, there's just not time for that. And when insurance is reimbursing off of time, that's really hard. And like, that's what I've seen it come down to a lot. It's like, well, we just don't have time for that. And that's disheartening for sure. But yeah.
Yeah. Cause I'm guessing insurance doesn't reimburse any rounding time.
I'm not sure. I've never worked in the billing industry, but I know like even in primary care, like the visits are set up for a certain amount of time, given like whatever the problem or diagnosis is or something. And so, that falls back to when you come to your doctor's appointment and you have all these questions, well, they don't have time to answer all of your questions. So like, thankfully, like I knew that going into these appointments. So I would come with like a list of things, and like I would know, okay, what do I want to get done today? And I can like ask those all the time. But like a lot of people don't know that. And it's like the doctor rushes in and rushes out, and they leave without like even getting to the point. Right. And I really wish it wasn't like that. I wish that like people could come in, get their questions answered, and get everything taken care of. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And I wish it did.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the big reasons why a lot of my business coaching clients that are nutrition professionals end up not taking insurance as payment, because it's like there are so many rules, and I feel like there's less for dietitians. Like I think dietitians can spend a lot more time with a client and they get reimbursed for that time, but there are limitations, and there's also, sometimes they don't get reimbursed or their rates get dropped or something like that. And so it is, insurance is one of these weird systems where it's like, in theory, you would think it would make it really valuable and like helpful, and that people would get good care and all of that. But in some cases, it's actually like creating this dysfunction that, oh, well, we only can spend 15 minutes max with this person. And like, what can you get done in 15 minutes other than just like review a chart, check, certain vitals, that kind of thing. Like there's literally no opportunity to go deeper in those situations.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So with your experience with conventional doctors and your illnesses that you've had over the last, and again, I'm just making assumptions about how long it's been, but just in the past few years, having these different things come up, do you feel now that you are getting the care that you need, or do you feel like you're still on this journey to figure out what do you actually need to do to improve your health?
I feel like having the diagnosis, especially for the endometriosis, like that was huge, because that like gives me something to say, like, this is why I'm having these symptoms. And so it kind of like solidifies that. But unfortunately, I've had surgery for the endometriosis, which is considered like that's the gold standard for diagnosis, and the excision is the gold standard for treatment. So I've had those things, but there's still just so much unknown about endometriosis that I'm now back at a loss of, okay, now what do I do? Right. We still don't know what the, like, scientists and people in general, we don't know what's the cause. There's theories, but we don't know what's the cause. We don't have a cure, and we don't have guidelines to say this is how we treat it. And so even though I am working with an endometriosis specialist, I still feel like there's just so much uncertainty, and there's so much that there's unknown, and it kind of puts it back on me to figure out like what to do, which part of it's good. Like, I think it's great for people to be involved in their care and to take responsibility and initiative, but also it shouldn't fall 100% on the patient. And unfortunately, it kind of is. Like, I have to still do a lot of the research and decide everything that I'm going to be doing and make all those decisions myself. So yeah, I think that there's a lot more work to do, but I am like encouraged that there are a lot more people these days focusing on endometriosis and studying it a lot more. So I'm hopeful that in the future, maybe people going through this, they'll have a different experience. Maybe they'll get diagnosed quicker and have better treatment in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something I see with a lot of people, again, that I work with as clients who are building their businesses. Because I even think about one of my clients specializes in PMDD, and that's another disorder that isn't really super well understood and not very easily diagnosed. And, a lot of the symptoms are mental health related. So, tends to get swept under the rug. And I feel like one of the reasons I'm so passionate about helping women, especially grow businesses, is because I think what we're going to see is that because the conventional medical system isn't either equipped or moving fast enough to help people, that we're going to have kind of this almost grassroots movement of individual providers that specialize and then are willing to do the research or willing to really get in the trenches with their patients and their clients to figure out like what is helpful, what's not helpful, what does the research say, and even with research, I mean, this might be a little controversial, but I even feel like women's health issues are not researched that much. Like, there's not a ton of money in studying endometriosis, right? So if you're waiting for hundreds of studies to come out on the exact best methodology for treating endometriosis, you might be waiting a while. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but it's not exactly, especially with COVID and everything, it's not exactly the highest priority that people are, putting money into the research of. So I do think there's a lot of value that can come from the people who are working with clients and patients directly and kind of almost getting some of that experiential data, I hate to say anecdotal because it's like, I feel like people always denigrate anecdotal information, but it's like, if you're just seeing patterns and you're seeing certain things work well for your clients, I feel like that's how science used to be done. It was like, oh, we're seeing a pattern here. Why don't we test this and put some, parameters around it? So I do think some of these conditions, particularly in the world of women's health, they're going to have to be kind of more of a grassroots process as opposed to waiting for these big research studies to come out. I don't know if you feel the same way. I see you nodding, so I assume that you at least agree with some of it.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be either or. I think it should be both. And, it's like we should be doing this and people should still be researching it, right? It's really it's frustrating how little research there is on endometriosis and compared to other things. And, I'm sure there's a lot of things behind it, financial for sure. And endometriosis affects 1 in 10 women, but so does diabetes. And how much do we know about diabetes? So much. There's 30 times the amount of research done on it. And it's crazy. And we're just so much more equipped to treat that type of stuff. But back to the grassroots method and the one-on-one kind of health coaching is kind of the way I see it. I think that's definitely needed, especially with how much information there is online. It's so confusing. Oh, I saw to do it this way, but then on another also reputable site, it says to do it this way. But you really need somebody to take your exact situation into perspective and then apply that. Well, yes, that thing is good, but maybe given your history and all of this, maybe that's not the best method for you, especially for diet. That's incredibly true because there's not a one size fits all, but also with, different supplements and exercise and, your day-to-day activities, there's a lot of information out there, but like people really need help like interpreting that information. And I think that's like where you are going to with the people working one-on-one. I think that can be really helpful too. And then, like you said, having that information of like, oh, well, this is maybe it's not done in a research study, but it is that type of anecdotal information, but it's information. And this is like how people respond to these therapies. And these are the symptoms that they commonly have. And these are the conditions that is commonly seen with them. I think that's all really valuable information. And definitely, that type of one-on-one support is really, really needed, and I think really valuable right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even what you were saying before about like having so much of the burden of decision-making on you as the patient, if you have someone that can even help you like weigh the pros and cons of a approach, because sometimes just even having had, years of experience working with people one-on-one, sometimes there isn't really a clear yes or no, right? Like, it's not like you see this information online and it's like, oh no, that's total nonsense. Don't do that. It's not going to be good for you. A lot of times it's kind of like, well, am I positive that that's going to help you? No. Am I positive it's going to hurt you? No. Like, I don't think, as long as there's not this clear potential for harm, you might say, well, maybe you just want to try it and see how it goes. And then you can almost work together to figure out, is that helping, rather than it be this like, oh, don't, because I feel like sometimes doctors will do this like, oh, you like checking Dr. Google again? Like, like they have this negative opinion of doing your own research. I feel like the last year is like, anytime somebody says, I've done my own research, everyone's like, you don't know how to research. You're not a scientist. It's like, okay, what do we need to call it where somebody is like not getting help from the conventional medical world and they're just like searching for information that can help them? Like, are we going to tell them that they're, that they shouldn't be doing that and they should just like, trust the doctor that said nothing's wrong with them, right? So I do think it's a situation where there isn't necessarily clear yes or no guidelines about this stuff. And if your options are do nothing and just suffer with it, or try some stuff that is low likelihood to harm, may not help, but at least could be an experiment that, who knows, maybe it'll be helpful. I just feel like I would love if medicine got a little bit back to more of that like practice mentality and like, being willing to try things that aren't necessarily like clearly evidence-based from like a, traditional Western scientific method kind of, mindset. And I don't know. Again, I agree with you that it would be great to have more research. Who wouldn't want more research, right? Like, we're all good for doing more research, but it just doesn't seem like there's like a massive like amount of money coming in to like fund that research. And for whatever reason, it's not a priority for some of the bigger research, universities and that kind of thing. So I don't think it's fair to expect people like you to wait for, somebody to endow a university with a big endometriosis fund to get the actual hard data that they think they need to make recommendations from.
And I think that like if somebody is coming into their doctor's office and they have done all of this research, instead of responding with, oh, don't confuse your Google search with my MD, like instead, can we see that and see like, wow, this is really affecting your daily living. You've done so much research. You've put so much energy into this. Wow, I can really see how much this is affecting you. Like, why can't we have that approach? Why can't we turn it the other way around and see it as, wow, this is life-changing for them. They knew nothing about this before, and now they know so much because it's affecting them so much. I think that that perspective really needs to be out there. And I mean, I felt that way too, coming in with all of my list of questions and things. But getting gaslit by doctors is really hard, and it's really common, unfortunately, but it's really hard to experience, unfortunately. And going back to the research end of things, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's just not a lot of funding going into it. And so it's like, well, I'm not really going to hold my breath and wait for it to come out. I'd love to see it, and I'm glad that there is a little bit more going into it. But yeah, you're right. It's not going to just like tomorrow, we're not just going to see like a wave of information coming through.
Mm-hmm. So I know you mentioned that you were given some strategies for communicating your symptoms to people when people couldn't see the symptoms and when you kind of had to make some tough decisions about like social life and that kind of thing. Do you have any sort of like pay it forward kind of tips that worked well for you that you could share with people who are struggling with these, non-observable illnesses?
Like the first thing is trusting yourself and setting boundaries. I think that's like the first thing before you communicate is for me, that's what I had to do is like trust myself and realize like you're okay. Like, look, you've got serious things going on and it's okay to say no to things. But for communicating, like I think it depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking just to like a colleague or a friend who you don't want to disclose a lot of information with, like you don't have to give them a why, right? Like, and as women, I think that's so hard. We're so apologetic in our nature. We're going to be like, oh no, sorry, I can't. I have to do X, Y, and Z. You can just say no, and if they want to ask why, they'll ask why. And a lot of times they don't, but you can just say no. And sometimes you can say, I'm not feeling my best right now. I won't be able to join. Like if there's an activity, I'm not feeling my best right now. I won't be able to join. Thanks for inviting me. I'd love to do this at another time. Or if you know that you have symptoms that like occur at a certain amount of, like at a certain time of the month or certain time of day, you can say, that time's not going to work great for me. Could we maybe do it this time? And you're not even giving a lot of health information or disclosing a lot. You're just saying that doesn't work good for me. Can we do it this time? That's kind of a little bit of advocating for yourself, but being realistic too and setting yourself up for success, knowing like, okay, this is when I feel my best. So let me schedule things then. And I think that at least for me, like the sharing just like whatever I need to instead of going off on a tangent or like vomiting all this stuff on them, like this is what I'm going through, just leaving it at that helps kind of protect you because they might not give you that support or that empathy that youth might feel is deserved for sharing all the information. And so that can like help you keep emotional boundaries too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just funny how like I'm somebody who will literally share like almost anything with anyone, and maybe I don't know if that's always appropriate, but there's pros and cons to it because I think sometimes like my willingness to share about tough stuff that I'm experiencing or have experienced then kind of normalizes it for people. So even us just being able to have this conversation with people listening, like neither of us know everybody who's listening to this conversation, right? So it's being vulnerable with strangers. Like I think there is really a lot of power in feeling like no shame about sharing stuff. Cause again, it's a health issue. Like it's not, you're not murdering people, right? Like there's no reason to feel ashamed about it, but it is something that can feel so private that it's like trying to balance that. Well, I don't want to have shame around it, but I'm also not obligated to tell people, right? So it's like kind of having that balance between sharing things when you feel it's appropriate and not, maybe knowing that even doing a podcast like this or sharing it with a friend, like that could be, you never know what impact it could have because maybe somebody doesn't even realize that they're experiencing a similar issue and they haven't gotten a diagnosis. So I do think there is benefit to opening up to people and also just knowing that you can keep whatever you want to yourself. You don't have to tell people if you don't want to. And I think sometimes we get on that like either end of the spectrum with it. It's like, oh, I either have to tell everybody everything, even if I don't want to, because if I don't tell them, they like will, not trust me or believe me or whatever. Or you get onto that side of the spectrum that's like, I don't want to tell anyone anything because like I'm embarrassed by it and, I got to keep it to myself. And it, that doesn't always give you the best experience either, because then you lose opportunity for people to be empathetic or to, again, like maybe have an impact on somebody that has that same issue and doesn't realize that they're, needing a diagnosis too. So I feel like we can find a happy medium there. And a lot of times it's going to probably come down to like individual circumstances and feeling confident in your ability to decide when you're going to share and when you're not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like going off of that, one tool that I learned that was really helpful has to do with like just comments that people make. So it's not 100% like me communicating, but I guess it is. But like comments that people make, like, oh, but you look fine, like that's a common one. Or well, I saw you out the other day. You weren't sick then, like things like that. And those things are like so loaded, especially if you're like carrying the burden of dealing with those chronic illnesses, especially the invisible illnesses. Like it's emotionally loaded because like when I hear that, I hear like, oh well, you're not sick. But that's not what they said, right? And so like something for me that's been really helpful is pausing and responding to what they said. So, oh, you don't look sick. You're like, you can just say something like, my symptoms associated with my condition aren't always physical. You could just say something like that. Or if they say, oh, well, you were out yesterday, you weren't sick then. Yeah, I was having a good day then. And that's kind of what happens with me. I have good days and I have bad days. So instead of like, and responding to like what you felt, responding to what was said. And like for me, that's been really helpful. It also goes back to keeping those boundaries and communicating well. And another thing that's been helpful is having resources that I can share with other people. So I don't have to be the educator every single time because that can be exhausting too. And so like saying like, yeah, I have endometriosis. And if they ask questions, then like sharing, or if you have a different condition, like say like, yeah, I have this condition. And if you want to learn more about it, you can check out this website or check out this book. That's been helpful for sure. But I think that the comments that get made a lot can be really tiresome for sure. So like for me, having set responses for certain things have been really helpful just to help with the mental exhaustion that comes with the different conditions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that, there's a lot of challenges that you face on a regular basis with these illnesses and just, the day-to-day stuff that can come up with it. I'm curious, just from like a different perspective, do you feel like there's anything, I hate to say like silver lining, or like there's a phrase called harvesting the good, like when you've gone through a bad experience or when you're in a bad circumstance, it's kind of almost thinking, okay, what can this do for me or for the world that could be positive? If it's affecting your career path or if it's affecting the way you treat people, like just different things that we can pull from these negative experiences, because we're not saying, oh yeah, it's like great to have an illness. Like that's obviously not the point, but I do kind of see like two different mindsets. One is kind of identifying with the illness and kind of like, letting it define you and define your behavior and hold you back from things that you want to do or are passionate about. Or I've seen people kind of go in the direction of like, I'm going to use this to fuel something that is a bigger purpose. Do you have anything, not to put you on the spot, but do you have anything that you feel like this has stimulated in you to want to do, or to like, even if it's small, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a huge career change, but I know like you have a website, for example, and I don't know if you've gotten passionate about like blogging or sharing your story. How do you see the challenges that you've faced? How do you see them possibly impacting your future trajectory?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I definitely feel like having all of these experiences, especially like in the order that I've had them, has really like changed my thoughts on a lot of things. Just because like even when I had the brain injury and going through the eating disorder, of course there was a lot of like mental challenges that went along with those things, but like physically, I was pretty healthy, right? Like not to say that everybody that goes through those things have that, but like for me, like I was able to do a lot, and like I was a long distance runner and I ran marathons, and like I worked a lot. I did all these hobbies, and like I ate whatever I wanted to, and I felt great, and I never really had like a lot of challenges, and I never really like empathize with people going through chronic illnesses, especially unfortunately going through the conventional background of like nursing and stuff. Like there's just so much that goes into chronic illnesses that are out of people's control, and I wouldn't have understood it to the degree that I do now if I hadn't gone through those experiences myself, specifically the endometriosis. And it's helped me understand different chronic illnesses so much, because like I never had that level of fatigue. I've never had like that amount of like abdominal pain and stuff before. And especially something that's not considered life-threatening, I don't know that I ever would have taken chronic illnesses as seriously or as life-changing as I do now. And so like on the flip side of things, it makes me feel more passionate about being a patient advocate for whether it's endometriosis or other things. But of course, with my own experience with endometriosis, I am more passionate about that. So yeah, I think it's helped me become a better advocate and help me empathize with people a lot more. Also, it's really shown me that there is no one size fits all for treatment. Like, again, going back to the diet and going back to like exercising and treatment modalities, whether it's birth control or supplements, for endometriosis, there's no one size fits all. And I might not have understood that to the degree that I do now had I not gone through my own experience. But looking forward, I'm kind of like in this place where I am really like encouraged and motivated to share more about endometriosis, like use my experience and like help other people maybe get a quicker diagnosis, or just like have like a story that people can look on and see like, oh, this is what I'm experiencing. What do other people experience? Because there's not a lot out there. And so that's kind of like with my website, I have a blog and I've just been sharing like how this has all affected me. And, hopefully people that will read it will feel like they're not in it alone, and that there's other people that have gone through similar things and are still going through it or on the other end of things, and encourage others that they can go through it too. So I'm not sure if it'll change my career path, but at least like right now, like my hope is to like encourage others that they're not alone and give them something for like expectations, or just like to see what others' experiences are so they can, know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like as much as the internet can be a little bit of a little bit of a cesspool with stuff sometimes, I do think that's one of the best benefits that we've had with the way that we're all connected virtually, is that, something that you might be the only one that that has the illness, and you feel super alone and you don't know what's normal. You don't know like even where to turn or like what resources there are. Just being able to share that even on something as simple as a blog, just to like have some opportunity to talk to other people, or to, see what other people are experiencing, and even getting ideas for stuff that can help, right? Because again, I feel like there is so much of this resistance in the conventional medical world to people kind of like experimenting with like unproven methodologies. And so I just feel like there's a lot of value to kind of having people that you can talk to that they said, oh, this really helped me, or like, even if it's little simple things, it doesn't have to be these like crazy supplement protocols or something. It could be just, different stress management techniques, or, stuff that could actually really make a big impact that the person wouldn't have necessarily thought to do. So I do love that you're sharing your story, and you're sharing just anything that you feel called to share about the illness, so that people can learn from it and feel like they have somebody who's an advocate for them, even if they're not, seeing you in real life or in your actual friend circle. Well, Morganne, it's been so awesome chatting with you. If people wanted to connect with you further and read your blog, or like just follow along with your journey and have that connection point, especially if they're dealing with endometriosis, where can they find you?
So I have an Instagram. It's called Running on Endo. And there I also, on that page, I just share like some educational stuff about endometriosis and stuff about my own personal journey. And then I also have a link there to my blog on WordPress, Morganne Skinner. So those are the best places to find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so people can follow along and follow you on Instagram, and just have another advocate for them in whether it's the endometriosis journey or just in general dealing with chronic invisible illness, having somebody who gets it and can empathize. Because I think sometimes with empathy, especially, there's a different level of empathy that you can experience when somebody actually has had the experience that you're going through versus like just trying to be a compassionate person. And so just being able to connect with people that get it from a personal experience perspective can be really valuable. Well, thank you so much, Morganne, for coming on the show and sharing your story and being willing to get vulnerable with us and share some of the stuff that's been helpful for you. And for those of you listening, I hope that this has been inspiring, even if you don't have the issues that Morganne was talking about, just being able to set those boundaries and to advocate for yourself if you are dealing with any sort of health issue that doctors haven't either recognized or believed you, like it's worth it to keep going and to keep looking for the person who's going to, one, believe you, and two, help you, navigate the issue. So thank you so much, Morganne.
Yeah, it was great being here. Thank you.
Awesome. And we'll see everybody here next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutrition entrepreneur looking to grow an audience of people who will actually buy your programs and services? Then keep listening, because I have a special limited time opportunity for you to get coaching from me and my top-level business coach on how to attract 100 of the right prospects for your nutrition coaching and consulting business. If you're looking to build a profitable, sustainable nutrition business, it doesn't matter if you have a brick and mortar practice or an online business. The fact of the matter is, all successful dietitian and nutritionist entrepreneurs know that in order to have demand and desire for their paid offers, their free content has to create that demand and desire. But unfortunately for most, they go about this process backwards. And no matter how big their list size, they hear crickets every time they try to sell something to anyone. I've been there myself, and I get it. It is beyond frustrating. But what if I told you that there was a surefire way of building an audience who not only craves your content, but literally begs you for it? That all of the hard work you put in can actually start paying off with sales and clients? And what if I also told you that you only need 100 subscribers to make it happen? Inside this free training from my expert coach, James Wedmore, you'll discover why traditional list building strategies don't work and just leave you spending months creating a bunch of free content that no one ever sees, or worse, attracts people that never want to invest with you. When you complete this free training, you'll start building a list that's literally going to be banging down your door to buy nutrition coaching and consulting services from you. Now listen, I've been working with James since 2018, starting with his incredible online program, Business by Design, and now as a part of his Performance Mastermind. And there's no one in the world of online business who I trust more to provide simple and effective, action-oriented content to learn how to become a digital CEO and grow a successful online business. I absolutely love every piece of training he puts out, and his free course on getting your first 100 leads is one of the best ones that he's ever done, and he's giving it away for free. Not only that, but as an extra special bonus, I'm running a live coaching group for 5 weeks starting on May 17th, where we'll go over the content from his training together, and I'll help you apply it to your nutrition business specifically. Between James's incredible teaching and my 9 years of experience running and growing an online health and nutrition business, we'll help you get those 100 high-quality leads faster and easier than ever before. To join us for this limited time free training and coaching experience, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/100 leads, that's 100 LEADS, and register now to grab your spot. I only run this free group once a year, so now's the time to join and learn everything you need to know about building a list of qualified nutrition clients quickly so you can have the profitable and successful nutrition business of your dreams. Go to lauraschoenfeld.com/100 leads and register now, and I'll see you in our free coaching group.